established here in 1828 by John and Archibald Mitchell, and we're still under the same family ownership today. Our owner and chairman is Henry Wright, and he's the great-great-grandson of John Mitchell, so we're a very family-run business. Scotland's oldest traditional working distillery. So on your tour round today, you're not going to see large, high-tech aluminium vats, computers, anything like that. Our production team here make our whiskey traditionally by hand, and it all starts in our malt barns. Now we use our local water throughout the production. We use it 3 times. Our water source is Scotland Rock, which was actually man-built in 1880 to accommodate our thriving distillery. With 37 working distilleries in Campbeltown at one point. So it's still ourselves and Glengyle, the only 2 industries actually still on the pipeline. It's a soft water and it's untreated when it arrives here. And we use the water, first stage, to actually soak our barley. Okay? Now, the barley is sourced from 2 different areas of Scotland. We source all our barley for our core range production from the East Coast. It's stored in when it arrives at the distillery. Oil and diesel tanks for the machinery inside the distillery, and this is the back of your still house. So that's your condensers, etc. coming out the back of the still house there. Okay? So if you don't want to come into the kiln area, the dryness. And then, tight squeeze. Okay, now, we have taken our barley, we've emptied it down the elevator system. Now that elevator system has then travelled our barley straight over. The barley is now going to rest above the smoke room, which is right next door there. Now the barley's lying on an aerated floor. The floor's made of metal, it's got wee holes in it, which is going to allow the smoke and the air through to dry and smoke the barley. So once the barley's in situ, we can then light the fire. Okay? Now, this is the peat here. Different types of peat. The wet peat is from Inverness, and the dry peat is from Tomintoul. Now, we're always going to start the fire off with the dry peat and burn that for a short period. Then we're going to mix the dry and the wet peat together and burn that for a short period. Then it's the wet peat only. And it's the wet peat that's going to dampen the fire down and release that fabulous smoke that we need to actually flavour our barley, which is lying above. Okay? Now another unique aspect of Springbank is our 3 expressions that we make here. They're treated, the barley's treated differently at this point for each of them and at distillation. Now the barley for our Hazelburn malt is completely air dried only. No smoke is added to our Hazelburn barley. 30 hours of hot air only. Springbank, 6 hours of peat smoke with 30 hours of hot air. And our long row is our heavily peated, up to 48 hours of peat smoke with 30 hours of hot air. So 3 very different expressions. Okay? Now, today you can actually have a look in the smoke room if you want. It's very, very dirty, and then just walk you into the holding area next door. If you look above, that is where the barley is dried and stored during the kilning process, and we introduce the hot air from the channel at the left-hand side there. Okay? In the smoke room, the barley has been dried and malted. Now it has to wait for at least 24 hours to actually cool down before we transfer it across on a conveyor belt into the holding bins. Now it's also very important that we test the moisture content of the barley. So it has to be at least 4% or less before we transfer it over into the holding bins. Otherwise, fungus and mold can grow in the barley. So it's very important. When we have the barley stored in the bins here, we're usually going to keep it for no longer than 2 months. Usually by that stage, we're ready to start the production. Okay? Now this is also an elevator system, a corkscrew system. It's over 75 years old. Porteous make, as is the conveyor belt in the malt barns. The mill is also a Porteous make as well. Now what we're now going to do is transfer our barley from here through into the mill for milling. But the first thing we have to do with the barley is clean it. Now this is the part of production that most distilleries start their production at, because most distilleries nowadays, they don't floor malt. They are buying their barley already dried and malted to their specifications. It's lovely and clean, so they can start the milling process. But what we have to do first of all is actually clean our barley. So we are going to empty the silos by turning the handle just at the bottom of the barley silo there. The barley is going to transfer, it's going to travel along this conveyor belt. It's going to meet right up with the conveyor belt at the bottom here, and then should be taken straight into the mill area for milling. Now this is what your barley looks like here. Have a wee look at this. This is what it looks like. Now, there's pieces of vegetation and husks, etc. in there. So what we want to start the milling process are lovely clean grains of barley. Okay? So that all has to be cleaned away. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay?
Yeah, why doesn't it remove the smoke? I just think you could sort of, you put all the smoking flavour into it, and then you're going to clean it again.
We're not cleaning the barley, we're sieving it.
Okay.
We're cleaning the husks out the barley. It's passing through a dresser. That's what we're going to do now. So what we're doing, we're not, all we're doing with the barley is actually shaking it to clean it. And that cleaning process is going to, underneath the dresser, all these wee pieces of vegetation and husks are going to be taken away. So that doesn't affect the flavour.
Lovely.
No, I thought you were going to wash it.
No,
again.
we're not washing it, no.
Oh, I see what
We're cleaning it.
Yeah,
We're cleaning it, yeah. We're
Yeah.
taking away all the husks and vegetation. Okay? So that's what we want.
Yeah,
Nice big fat grains of clean barley.
yeah.
So the volume is massively reduced then. So
What we're left with, the barley's like that after the sieving process. Okay, so lovely big fat grains of barley. Now the barley's then going to pass down through the coop. To this point here, the barley's completely clean and we're now ready to mill it. Now we've got 3 sets of rollers in there. We've got a feeder roller and 2 grinders underneath here. So when the barley has been ground, this is what it looks like. Okay? Now that is what we call grist. And here we have the 3 parts of the barley. We have husks, we have the middles, and we also have flour. Now we're going to use a percentage of each part of that barley in the next stage, which is sugar extraction. Now each distillery is going to work on a different volume. Here at Springbank we work on 3.5 tonne of grist to 17,000 litres of water. Okay? Now within that 3.5 tonne of grist, 70% of it is going to be the middles, which is the most important part. That's where all the soluble sugar is. 20% is the husks, and 10% will be flour. Okay? What we're then going to do is take our grist from the receiver upstairs, gently release it. We've heated our first water to 63.5 degrees. It's also going to be gently released. The grist and the water are going to heat together in a large pipe at the side of the mash tun, and we're now going to pump the water and the grist into the mash tun, and we're now ready to fill the mash tun right up to get it full and start the sugar extraction. Okay? So that's the next stage for us. Get all the sugars out of that grist. Now, the tun itself here at Springbank is over 100 years old. It's made of cast iron, it's a conventional tun, and it's not fully automatic either. Okay? So feel free to have a wee look around here, folks. There's ladders at either side. I'm going to keep it.
Definitely.
This is really cool.
Okay, folks, now the mash tun. another mash. This time the water's slightly warmer at 72 degrees. Give it 2 slow stirs and then extract the sugary water via the underbank, which is this piece of equipment here. We'll do a third and a fourth mash. This time the water's much warmer at 82 degrees. Now the waters we receive back from our third and fourth mash, we reserve them, and we're going to use those waters as our first and second waters of the next mash. Okay? But this old mash tun is not fully automatic, so we have to take back part of our fourth water and slush it round there. We're then going to pump what we now call the draft out into the drainer outside, drain off any excess water, which will go back into the fourth water, and that is what the draft is what the farmer is going to take away to the farm to feed to the cows and sheep. So that's completely edible. The cows and sheep are going to eat that. It's full of protein. They don't, because there's no alcohol in it at this point. And there's hopefully no sugar left in it either. So it's full of protein. Full of protein for them. We're also left with a byproduct from the distillation, and that's called your effluent or pot ale. And we're also going to give that to a farmer. That's a liquid byproduct, and he's actually going to spray that in fields to fertilise the soil.
So you use everything?
Basically, yeah, there's not enough of it. That was one of the reasons that it was most of the farmers that actually built distilleries. The draft, he doesn't put the draft away, another farmer.
Oh, it's smoky. Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Take a picture.
Are we all up? Yeah. Okay, folks, now this is fermentation. And as you can see, we have wash bags here at Springbank. We would never use metal. We're relying on so many flavours actually coming through the wood during fermentation, so it is important that we use wood. Now, to start fermentation, we are going to take our wort through from the receiver next door. It's been passed through a pan of flow to cool it down, and then we're going to open one of the valves and introduce the wort, and we're going to start filling up the wash bag gently. First thing we have to do is actually test the alcohol level and the temperature. So we're going to do that, we're going to throw the thermometer in, and once it gets to 16 degrees, we're then going to add our yeast. Now it's a distiller's yeast that we use at the moment, just an M strain distiller's yeast. It's a putty consistency. So we'll break it all up, throw it in, and then fill up the wash bag to about that ring there. Okay? Now, this is also going to be a very, very slow fermentation. It's going to take up to 110 hours compared to other distilleries, which are usually around about 80. But what we want to achieve is a very, very fruity wash with a very low alcohol content. And when I open the wash bags and you can start smelling them, you'll realise what I mean, because it is very, very fruity.
What's the alcohol content we're looking at here
At the
this
end
stage?
of it, it's between 5 and 6%, yeah. So it's quite low as well compared to other distilleries. But I mean, each of these wash bags is steam cleaned after each fermentation, but we're never going to get them 100% sterile. And we're relying on that friendly bacteria as well to help flavour our wash. So it is important to us. We're using the wood, never metal. Okay? Now they're all going to be at different stages. So if we have a look in the different here.
Wow.
Let's take a look at this one. Oh wow, that's different stage. Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah. Oh, you can smell. Wow.
it's called-
You can actually smell it. Oh wow.
It's so
beautiful.
like the other one.
Yeah.
that we're different here at Springbank. We have 3 different distillation processes for each of our malts. Now, now, 3 different distillation processes for each of our malts. Our long roll is double distilled, Springbank is 2.5 times distilled, and Hazelburn is triple distilled. Now Hazelburn is the newest of our malts, and we started to bottle it in 1997. Long roll was 73, and Springbank has always been 2.5 times distilled. Our owner's father's 2.5 times distilled, so it's always been done like this. But the Spirit Safe is 110 years old, and it was made in Campbeltown by Robert Armour and Son. There's the stamp there. Now this gentleman's company would have made most of the copper work for our thriving distilleries in those days. Smaller stills, copper pipes, etc. So it's completely manual, and the team obviously have to learn how to work.
What's the reason to triple distill Hazel?
Triple distill gives it a much lighter character. It's only ourselves and Dockintoshan in Scotland that triple distill. It's more of an Irish method. Frank, our manager that actually introduced our triple distillation, was the manager over in Bushmills.
Okay.
So when he came to Springbank, 3 stills, he wanted to introduce a triple. So it is much lighter in character because it's passing through your 3 stills, 2 different condensers, which is also going to help influence your whisky as well.
But that one's also got no peat in it, either.
It doesn't, no peat.
So it's light and
Much lighter. That's the lightest of all our malts, the
very
Hazelburn.
different flavour.
Different flavour completely than your slightly peated Springbank and your heavily peated Long Roll. Yeah, 3 very different malts. Yeah, but I'll speak about the Hazelburn because it's the longest of the distillations, and it's also going to give us the highest alcohol content at the end as well. Now for that distillation, we take our wash straight through from the wash back. Now, one wash back, as I said, 20,000 litres. We're going to take 10,000 litres of that initially and pump it from the receiver up here over into the wash still, which is the furthest of our 3 stills here. Now from that first distillation, we're going to receive the low wines, which are down here. We then put our low wines into the middle still, which is our first low wine spirit still, and from that distillation, we receive faints. Now we then put 100% faints into the 3rd still, which is our second low wine spirit still, and from that distillation, we do the spirit cut. Now this is your safe. Your safe is going to come in now. Now, most distilleries nowadays, very modern, they've got spirit safes that tell the maltmen when to do their spirit cuts, etc. Also check the temperatures. Our team have to learn how to work this old safe, and it's completely manual, as you can see. Wash still is always going to run out this side. Okay, these are our first and second low wine spirit nozzles here. So for the triple distillation, the first thing we have to do from here is check the alcohol level. So we're going to fill one of these wee glass chambers. Using the hydrometers and thermometers, we're going to check the alcohol level. We've got a wee conversion chart there in the book. We're going to write that down. Then we're going to let the heads of the distillation run for at least 40 to 45, 50 minutes until that run gets to a certain alcohol level. That is when we're going to cut it. So the maltman is usually going to cut the Hazelburn distillation round about between 60 to 65% alcohol. Okay? He's then going to turn the nozzle from the side pot here into the centre pot, which is there. And we're then going to run our new make spirit. Okay? It's going to run out the back through a pipe, and we're going to receive it over here in the corner. Now that new make spirit is going to run for a few hours. Also gets to a certain point that the maltman's going to do his cut again, and then the tails of the distillation is going to kick in, and he's then going to turn the nozzle from the centre pot back over to the side pot, and that is us now running off our tails of the distillation, which will be received here. So our heads and tails are going into this vat. Now what we can do at a later stage is collect our heads and tails, and we can distill that again. And that is, we can distill it, gets to a certain point that we can't distill it anymore, and that is where we've spoken about the effluent and pot ale, and that is what's taken away for fertiliser. Okay? 2.5 times distilled. What we do for our Springbank, we double distill. We take 80% of our faints, 20% of our low wines, and we pump it into the third still, and we do the cut after that distillation. So that gives us a 2.5. And the double for our longbow is a double distillation. We use the end still. 2 different condensers in each of the stills as well. So it's going to influence the flavour of the whiskies. Okay. Any questions? No? Don't you get any questions? No? A low wine is the name. It's the name from the first distillation. It's always called low wines.
It's called low lines.
Low wines.
Oh, low wines.
Yes.
Right,
That is what you call the product from the first
okay. From
distillation.
the first distillation.
Yeah.
Right.
And faints.
So you're always mixing that with the next distillation?
Yeah. You're going to keep some back.
I see.
You're going to keep a percentage back. Here. Your heads and your tails are kept here.
How many more then have you got?
12.
How long does it take to train?
This is only, you only get the experienced maltman working here. We employed 2 younger staff 2 years ago, and they're actually learning the maltings just now. They've worked their way through to kilning, and they're now regulating the barley, but they haven't reached this stage yet. So it's a wee bit of time. Because we're also bound by customs and excise as well, so everything has to be written down in these books. We're all accountable, so everything has to be.
It's all manual?
Yes, everything has to be written down. Yes, all the temperatures, cut percentages, etc. are all written down here. Yeah.
So what does cut really mean? Is that when you mix the two?
No, that's when you do your cut.
That's when you do your test, basically.
That is when you run off the heads, the tails, and the middles. You separate it basically. Now, this is when it starts getting exciting because we're now ready to select our casks for maturation. Now, for all our core range bottlings, Longrow, Springbank, Hazelburn, we're always going to start maturation off in ex-bourbon or ex-sherry casks, unless we're doing something very special and we're going to start maturing into rums, red wines, whatever. So what we're going to do, we are going to stencil the name of our new make spirit on the cask end. We're going to give each cask a serial number for the warehouse and an A, B or C fill. Now A is a first fill, B is a second fill and C is a third and last fill. And we're only going to use a cask here 3 times and then discard them. Okay?
So you get rid of them after 3?
We do, but they could be 60 or 70 years old by this point. So they are ready to retire. The wood is getting soft, they may leak, so we're going to get a good few years out of them. But the first thing we have to do is dilute the alcohol content down of our new make spirit. The 3 different new makes are all going to be reduced down to 63.5% alcohol with our local water. Okay? So once that's done, we're then ready to fill the casks. So we're going to roll them over, fill them up, but we need to get over in the corner. A piece of hessian cloth, hammer on the bung, that's the cask secure. Okay? So we're now ready to start the maturation process. These are the different sizes of casks that we have here at Springbank, from your butt right down there to your your smaller casks. Now we've also got smaller casks that we use, quarter casks, we run got some Kings, Firkins, etc. And we've also got a larger cask that I'll point out to you in Bond 3 when we're in. But we fully mature all our own casks here on site. Nothing leaves the distillery for maturation elsewhere. We've got 8 warehouses, 1 on the way. Our new racked warehouse is going to be complete by November. But at the moment we have 6 dunnage warehouses and 2 racked warehouses to mature our casks in.
What's the difference between the flavour of whisky depending on the storage facility?
Good question. The dunnage warehouse is a much slower maturation. It's much more flavoursome whiskies that come out of dunnage warehouse due to the smell. It's a slower evaporation process as well compared to a racked. Racked warehouses are more concrete based. It's a much higher rate of maturation as well, so it's a quicker maturation in a racked warehouse than it is in a dunnage. It's more traditional as well, a dunnage warehouse.
Okay. And bear in mind that you are doing a smaller volume in comparison with other distilleries.
Yes.
What's your, would you say, annual angel share?
Angel share, that depends on the casks.
Okay.
Because your casks are all going to lose a different percentage of volume on a yearly basis. So for example, large casks like your back there, it's maybe going to lose between 1 to 1.5% volume yearly, whereas your smaller casks can be much higher, between 5 and 8 on a yearly basis. So it depends. Obviously, as well, the temperature of the warehouses depend on the evaporation process as well, but none of our warehouses are temperature controlled. So it's, and most of the casks are going to rotate. The only cask that's going to remain all its life in a dunnage warehouse is the Springbank 21 and the 25-year-old. They're 100% dunnage matured.
Okay.
All the rest of the casks may see both types of warehouse during their maturation. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
What does dunnage mean?
Dunnage means earth in Gaelic. It means earth. So all dunnage warehouses have earth floors. And it's that earthy smell that's going to help flavour the whisky and the new made that's actually lying in the cask.
So the racked one has a concrete base?
More or less, yeah.
When
And
you,
they're
say,
right.
when you say they're losing a certain percentage a year, where to?
Atos,
Yeah.
the air. The wood's porous.
So if I sat in here all day, I'd be drunk from the air.
Well, you would if you locked your shell in the warehouse. Maybe not drunk, but you would have a... You'd smell nice, put it that way.
I thought it was low lines. And it was sort of sounded nautical. Oh, did it?
Sounds like.
Wow.
So this is when we're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ready for me to.
Okay, folks, now this is a dunnage warehouse that I spoke about. If you have a look, earth. It's that earth that builds up smell in here. So, fabulous smells. Earthy smells. The casks that are lying here, they're going to absorb all that smell. At least 70% of the colour and the flavour of the whisky is coming from the cask, but we've got 30% that we're playing about with, and that's your environment. So we are very lucky to have that salty sea breeze circulating round the warehouses all year round. Now you'll see the difference in sizes of all the different casks. We've got various different casks in here. Sherry butts, red wine casks. This is a port pipe, this one here. And we've actually introduced, we've matured all our whisky from Glengyle Distillery also down here, and we call it our Kilkerran malts. This was new make Kilkerran that we, 2013 these casks were filled. So that's going to be a full port maturation. These are port pipes. So that's going to be fabulous when we bottle it. So they're a lovely red colour. Going to take on the port qualities of the cask during its maturation. Yes. You've also got different red wine casks further down, bourbon casks, etc. Now, Springbank also owns Cadden Heads. Cadden Heads are Scotland's oldest independent bottlers, and they were founded in Aberdeen in 1842. And our owner, Mr. Wright, bought Cadden Heads in 1972. And what Cadden Heads does is they buy casks from distilleries that sell casks, and we take them here, we'll mature them further, we can experiment a wee bit with them as well, and then we will bottle them under the Cadden Heads name. Okay? Now we also bottle all our own whiskies here as well. We don't have access to our bottling hall on Saturdays, but when we're ready to bottle our whiskies, we take the casks down to the bottling hall, we vat our different cask types together in our large Marion vat, whatever bottle we're going to be bottling. And we either reduce the alcohol content down and bottle it,
How
or
do you do that? How do you reduce alcohol?
we add water again.
Just to add water?
Yes. So for example, all the cask strength is going to be taken in the vat of the alcohol, the cask strength is going to be taken, and we'll reduce that down to 46%. We bottle at 46% here at Springbank unless it's a cask strength bottling. So it's just basically diluted.
Okay.
And it either goes back in a plain cask to marry together for a few months, back in the warehouse, or it will be bottled through the bottling line. Depends on what we're doing.
So the alcohol level changes in the...
Absolutely.
In the
Each cask is going to have a different
Slightly
alcohol level. They're never ever going to be the same. If you test 70 casks from the same spirit run, each of these casks are going to be slightly different in alcohol content. So that's why we vat them, we mix them together, and then we decide what we're going to do. Because it depends on what we're actually going to be bottling. Yeah.
Where do you get the barrels from?
All over the world.
You don't make any here,
No.
do you? They're
We
all
need
second
pre-use,
hand.
we always have to be second hand. That's what's going to enhance the flavours.
Yeah.
So all our bourbon casks come from the States, different distilleries, sherry casks, Spain, Italy, different finos, Olorosos, yep. Different red wine casks from all over the world, South Africa, New Zealand, wherever. So we source from all over the world, so we've got various different
Is that
casks.
true of all Scottish distilleries?
Yeah, most distilleries now are experimenting and buying different casks, etc. Yeah.
So the different bottles of whiskey could taste quite different.
Absolutely, you're completely right, and that's what people like about Springbank, because we don't chill filter or add any colourings or flavourings to our whiskies. So the colour you see in the bottle is the colour it comes out the cask at, and our core range is going to change slightly on a yearly basis because we're traditional. We may use more A-fill casks, B-fill casks, C-fill casks when we actually make up that bottling's wee recipe. So for example, our Springbank 10 is always going to be 60% bourbon, 40% sherry cask, but we may have used 2 A-fill casks, 2 A sherry casks to 2 B-fill casks, and in the previous year, the previous year it could have been a slightly different ratio, and it could be different distilleries as well. It could be Hidden Hill bourbon that we've used, and maybe Jack Daniels the year before. So that's going to help influence the flavours as well. So
Some distilleries now increase the age of bottlings that they release. Is it dependent on the cask? There's casks that were available back in the day, 60s, 70s, were better, or would you say, or because
every distillery are going to be slightly different. It depends on personal choice as well, because some people like older whiskies, some people like younger whiskies. It's entirely, nowadays people are experimenting a lot more than they did back then. So there's more variety now than there was then. I mean, there's probably more wine whiskies that have been matured in different wines, different sherries, etc. So there's definitely more a variety now than there was in the 60s and 70s. Definitely, yeah. But each distillery is trying to try something different, But I think for a small distillery, we produce a huge amount. Although we have our core range that we produce all year round, we always have single cask bottlings that we're producing within that year. So there's always something different for people to try and buy, hopefully. But the only problem, it is limited, it's very, very limited. So
What's the oldest one in here then?
the oldest one here was a 3 22-year-olds, but they have moved.
Okay.
So I do not know what that is now, because they moved a few months ago. I haven't been in here for a couple of months myself, so I really don't know what the oldest one is at the moment. We roll them. We've got a wee forklift truck that actually goes under the larger casks, like for example this one. And believe it or not, that piece of foam is for bumping the casks off.
That's foam.
Yes, that's foam. We use that for bumping the casks off if we need